Howdy. It is Wednesday evening, which means I am just back from basketball. So I'm pretty beat, and I still have things to do, like make dinner. Oh my god. But I'll survive. Um, and I'm probably getting my hair cut tomorrow. So lots of things on my mind. But one of those things is what we're doing right now. This was requested special offense in Advance OU. So here is the overview. And it is my preferred style of offense in advance. I think it's by far the most consistent. Generally, you split offense into three categories of physical, mixed or spikeless, and special. Obviously, you can mix and match and, physical with mag and without mag, magneton for those unfamiliar, um, are very, very different, and mixed or spikeless can mean a lot of different things. But another way to refer to mixed or spikeless is also trapless because these teams don't use magneton or Dugtrio. So those teams I have railed against in the past. I think they're bad. I think that by and large they can work, but they are very, very limited, and I would consider a good team with them to be very, very specific. I think most permutations of physical and mixed, spikeless, whatever you want to call it, offense is generally not good. And I saw someone the other day saying, "Oh, well, don't you bring them to tournaments?" Well, yeah, people bring all sorts of stuff to tournaments, even if they don't think it's that good, because at the high level, you have to mix it up so you're not just bringing your favorites all the time, as much as that may irritate you. So sometimes, yeah, you have to take a chance on a team style that you don't think is that great. But even that team style does have, its good points, obviously. It's just that the standard for me personally for what constitutes a good physical or mixed offense team is, much higher. Now, why am I going on about these? Well, because I don't have the same problem with special offense. I think there are a bunch of really, really good ways to do special offense. And this basically boils down to the fact that the special sweepers are really good. Because a lot of mixed offense also winds up centering around like a DD tar sweep or a DD Ment sweep. And it's generally more physically leaning. It tends to be more physical attackers that throw on special attacks to get past Skarmory and Swampert. So that's because it is easier for those physical attackers to throw on, Fire Blast, HP Grass, to get past Skarmory and Swampert more easily. Get past their physical walling. I'm very sorry. Like I said, I'm kind of beat. So forgive my lack of eloquence. Uh, it's easier for physical attackers to get past physical walls by throwing on special attacks, right? Because the physical walls are not as immovable in the face of these. And it's also easier for the physical attacker to slap them on. It's not a big chore for T-Tar to slap on Fire Blast, Metagross to slap on Thunder Punch, HP Fire, HP Grass, things like that. It doesn't come at no cost, obviously, but it's generally pretty easy, and the walls in question are not as immovable. So, special offense, that's why mixed offense generally leads more physical. Not to say that you can't have like a Zapdos or something, but you get where I'm going with this. Now, with special offense, it's not the case because your number one wall is, of course, Blissey. And the special attackers do not really have physical moves that that you could just tack on. You can't just throw focus punch on a Suicune or something and suddenly, oh well, Blissey doesn't wall me anymore. It doesn't really work like that. So you have to take other routes. So that's why generally mixed stuff is more physical leaning. But the upside of the special attackers is your biggest concern is Blissey by far, of course. But the reason why it's so great is that if you can deal with Blissey, everything else is a cakewalk by comparison. A lot of the issues with physical and mixed stuff, stuff that centers around physical finishers, is that they tend to be very unreliable. DD Tar isn't that fast or that strong for that matter. Mence has power issues. And coverage issues if you start trying to fit Brick Break in there. Gyarados is a mess. The 3D deers. Agility Metagross is great, but you can't always run agility. Salic Heracross is famously unreliable, although definitely the most devastating. But generally, they have the issue where they're not fast enough, not strong enough. Mainly the power thing, and that they're easier to strike back against because they are generally more vulnerable to special attacks. They generally, I've talked about the balance between special and physical attackers before in advance, that generally the special attackers have the edge because they're faster and therefore they are able to hit the physically oriented Pokemon on their weaker defensive stat more easily. And you kind of see where I'm going with this. Because that doesn't just pertain to the physical attackers that they have the advantage over, in a one-on-one, but also in the sense that you sweep much more easily with a special attacker because there are much fewer ways to really, really check them outside of Blissey. Whereas, with physical attackers, pretty much everything is a physical check in some form, because it's not just, mag the Skarm and then, remove the perk. Oh, and now your DD Ments has to get through Blissey, or your DD Gara, and then there's Gengar, being a pain. You have to get through a million things. The Metagross is going to get in your way, Claydol. Everything is kind of like a physical check. And the same does not apply to the special finishers in that, you don't really take a hit from boosted special attackers nearly as well. They have much greater OHKO potential, both right off the bat and after a boost. And they tend to be, they don't boost their speed, but they're naturally faster, with the exception of Kingdra, who's amazing. Did something... Okay, no, that was just a notification. I was like, if this stopped recording, I'm going to be very upset. I'm sure it wasn't important, whatever it was, he said, foolishly. Special attackers have the advantage I was just talking about. It's easier to, really lock it down. That's my perspective anyway. My years and years of frustration trying to get physical stuff to work just because Will-O-Wisp is everywhere. That's so easy to exploit. But it also helps because they're naturally faster and they have greater OHKO potential, because they have greater type coverage. They're generally way more colorful in this regard. Oh, what are these special attackers you're talking about? I don't know, Advance. We'll get to that, don't worry. And the fact that when you're boosting with Calm Mind, you obviously boost your special defense as well, so that makes you much more difficult to take out. You remove a very important revenge killing tool. Like for example, Celebi, Jirachi, yes, they have a weakness to Charizard's Fire Blast. After a Calm Mind, they are not going down to a single Fire Blast. So you see that, for example, or Suicune and Zapdos. So that, with the fact that they're naturally faster, than their physical counterparts, means they don't really have to boost their speed. They, just need that boost and they're off to the races. They're already threatening without, the boost because they are, by virtue of being faster, they have greater opportunity. They also generally have less exploitable weakness. The big exception is, of course, Celebi and its bug weakness. But, the things that are threatening Celebi with bugs, Celebi generally threatens as well. So, So the thing you're wondering, though, is like, okay, yeah, I get that, but how do you deal with the Blissey of it all? Because Blissey is famously immovable. So there are a couple of ways. The easiest way is just to say Dugtrio, but it does wind up being true. And it's how I have come to run some very, very bulky, very slow Dugtrios, because the kind of special offense that I think is the scariest is the kind that you want the best sets for when Blissey is not in the picture, right? And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're trying to finish off things with Calm Mind Jirachi, which you're often going to be doing because it is, in my mind, the best special cleaner. But which one? Do you go with 3 attacks? And, even if you go with 3 attacks, which 3 attacks? But let's just, for now, 3 attacks versus Sub Calm Mind. Because Sub Calm Mind generally dunks on Blissey. But against pretty much everything else, then you want that 3rd attack. I mean, yes, Sub is great in general, I know, okay? But, broadly speaking, the special attack investment, the coverage, it's just fantastic, right? So that's generally my preference. So in that case, you have to get that Dugtrio trap off. So I am all for really bulking Doug out, not just to live an Ice Beam from Blissey, but to live an Ice Beam from Blissey after a Spike. So this leaves you with very slow Dugtrio, but I personally like that. You don't have to like that. That's your preference. I think it works, but if you want to experiment, I mean, again, this is where each individual player's preference comes in. Yeah, and obviously also the team you're building. I think it really depends on the demands uh, that you are placing on your Dugtrio. But generally, you will get the don't fall asleep, Kev. You got to eat. You got to go pick up that thing. Yeah, I have to pick up an electric razor that we ordered off the internet, an electric toothbrush, and something for the cat, I think. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, you will need to really bliss-proof your Doug. The general idea is that yes, you want to prevent spikes from going down. That's why people lead with Zapdos, right? And by the way, I'm a big fan of modest Zapdos because you will get these, goofballs who will go, well, I always live timid Zapdos Thunderbolt with the Spadef Skarm, so I'm just going to get my lair. So, and even with modest, it's not guaranteed, but you have the potential to really make them look stupid if they just go for it. So, plus it's just great in general. You can also throw Claydol on as your rock resist if you want to alleviate some of the pressure on your Doug. Doug Claydol is a famously good combination in general. So you're starting to see how these come together, and the Zapdos Dugtrio thing. By the way, anyone getting into Advance, I have to warn you that people will make very exaggerated statements about right now and at the moment, this is good, this is bad. And so if you're trying to learn Advanced, that can be very daunting. It's like, oh, how do I keep up with these trends? And so what I've observed over my very long time playing and observing Advanced is that generally these claims are very overblown. And I think people tend to make them just to say, oh yeah, I know what's going on, I'm hip. Because they're Travis Bickle. And they it tends to be stuff like, oh, well, Jirachi's really good right now. Salamis is really good right now. It's like, as opposed to before when they weren't foundational advanced Pokemon, come on. If a certain set is really, good, then sure, but yeah. And the reason I bring this up is not just because it's a personal crusade of mine, but because I remember there was a time where people were saying, oh, the Zap-Dug combination is broken. And then after a while, people were saying, oh, Zap-Dug is awful. Get with the times. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the combination of Zapdos and Dugtrio is kind of eternal. It's like people acted like it was some sort of new discovery, Zapdos baton passing to Dugtrio. And that suddenly we had realized it was super broken, and it was ridiculous. So I say that just as a little preface in case you hear, whispers from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. Or let me be nicer, from someone who understands the metagame but is asserting something that's not entirely fully there. So yeah, often Zapdos BPs the Dugtrio, and here's where you start to see the magic of special offense. In that, yes, Blissey will wall Zapdos, if you're not surrounding it with lots of spikes and, mixed HP fighting stuff, or like even Drill Peck. But the thing is, not much else really answers Zapdos. It's like the closest you're going to get is like Spadef Celebi, which is also Dugtrio vulnerable, of course. And the big thing is that Celebi is not getting in the way of your Calm Minesweepers. So generally your structure is going to be like Zapdos, Dugtrio, Rock Resist, which can, be Jirachi, but you got to have a plan for Aero, DD-Tar. And then, Jirachi, Suicune, Celebi. That's the trio of Calm Minesweepers. They're not the only things you can run. Of course, I'm personally a big, big fan of Rain Dance Kingdra, which is stronger because of rain, so it's kind of like a Calm Mind for your Water Stab, which is the big one anyway. And Ice Beam is, KOing most of what it needs to KO anyway, because of the coverage. And also it's boosting its speed, so it's very unique in that regard. If you want other speed boosting things, people like Salicberry on like Calm Mind Jirachi too, or like Salicberry Golduck, because it doesn't need to run leftovers and it can sub or endure down to low health because of Cloud 9, which lets it ignore Sandstream. I'm just throwing out like that's a pretty gimmicky thing, but just an idea. It's like, oh, it doesn't have to be Suicune, Celebi, Jirachi, but it generally is two of those three, if not all three. You can also throw Raikou in the mix. Yeah, that's generally, you can use a lead Raikou for a similar purpose to Zapdos, but generally you gotta get where this is going. And the sets are obviously very flexible. You can throw in Pert in there, just standard defensive or like a mixed Pert. You can throw in all sorts of Metagrosses in there, of course. Yes, I realize that the plural of a Pokemon's name is still, the singular form. It's Metagross plural, not Metagrosses, but leave me alone. Yeah, you can do all sorts of stuff. That's something else. Never mind. I was going to say special Salamence, but yeah, Charizard is a great choice on these teams. Yeah, so that's generally the idea. So with Zapdos, you bait in their special wall, right? And with Dugtrio, you have a method for punishing that special wall. So, whether it's Blissey, Celebi, Spinef, Jirachi, they're all very Dug vulnerable. That's why Zapdug is kind of tried and true, because Zapdos tends to destroy flying Pokemon, and the Pokemon that check it, sneeze coming, excuse me. As soon as I said it, never fails. Then it will, the special wall will crumble to the Dugtrio, generally. It's not as simple as that. You don't just throw Dugtrio into everything and watch it drop. But that's generally the idea behind it. The team will not do all the work for you. You still have to play well. I think that's something people forget a lot of the time. It's an easy trap to fall into because, like, what's the most dominant style in the tier, right? Skarmory teams. You can not know advance too well, and Skarmory teams will still lead you in a good path towards victory because they kind of play themselves a lot of the time, right? You get your Spike. Oh, the special attacker comes in. I go to Blissey. Oh, the DD I go to my Swampert. Here's my Gengar. I throw out Will-O-Wisp because it hits everything. I'm not saying they take no skill to use. Please don't misinterpret that, which is another favorite pastime of Pokemon players. Can you tell that I have a contempt for the vast majority of Pokemon players? Not because they're Pokemon players, but because of the attitudes that are very prominent. Attitudes. Austin my choice for the best advanced player ever. He was always like Dunning-Kruger, man. It never fails. But yeah, to not get too sidetracked, the idea is that Zapdos will, or if not Zapdos, then something else like Gengar. But you got to bait in those special checks. And I realize that Blissey, Celebi, Jirachi are not the only ones. I know there's Snorlax and Regice, but we're getting there. These are the big ones, right? Because these are the ones that are mostly Blissey, or really just Blissey, that are standing in the way of your sweep. Because Celebi and Jirachi, good special walls against, like Zapdos, and, they can help against a lot of other stuff. But they're not thwarting Calm Mind boosting. Not the offensive kind anyway, which is, yeah. Celebi can help against offensive Suicune, but it's not, ironclad by any means. It has to be fast. It's not like pure walling. So the point is, you bait in these special walls, you threaten them with Dugtrio or other methods. It doesn't just have to be, Dug or Bust. That's, of course, a very risky method. And what I was saying is that this style generally gives you the tools to outplay. You don't want to play in a very predictable linear fashion, but you also have to recognize, but that goes true for any team, even like the safe Scar and Bliss stuff, you are best with Scar and Bliss when the opponent doesn't know exactly what's coming. From your team, from your plays, I mean, you mix up your switches a little, you get aggressive, that's when you really find the groove. But yeah, here you force the special wall, and then you get rid of it, and then you sweep with your special attackers. It's pretty easy, right? So you think, oh, well, what about things like Claydol pivoting in to Zapdos? And that's when sub comes in, because as soon as Zapdos subs, that's when you ruin things like Jirachi trying to, not that every Zapdos needs to run substitute, but if you want consistency, if you want to avoid players checking your Zapdos with Claydol, because it's not that Claydol is a good Zapdos check, because it doesn't really hurt it back, but what it does do is it pivots in as you use Baton Pass. T-Bolt, if you think the Skarm's going to spike, or BP if you think the Bliss is going to come in. Claydol covers both of those. You don't want to be, wasting time HP grassing, on the Blissey switch. Or HP icing. So with sub, you are safe. If Blissey comes in, you pass to Dugtrio just like you would if you had BP'd on the switch, right? And obviously then Blissey it's very risky to switch a Blissey out of a Zapdos that has a sub up, especially because if you do, you just go to something else. Yeah, but then the Blissey will, get dugged, right? And if Claydol comes in, then, you are free to HP Grass it, HP Ice it, and it's not doing anything to you. And then the Blissey's forced to come in, and that's what you want. Defensive Jirachi sit all over. Celebi gets taken advantage of similarly. So sub is generally a very safe way of doing things. But if you don't want to sub because you want T-Wave or whatever, or Toxic, that's fine too. You don't even need Baton Pass, really. It's just generally the easiest way to do things, because the great thing about Zapdos is that it is faster than its checks. So you get to scout. Your opponent's not going to be surprising you with any double switches that you can't respond to, rather. So with that in mind, Zapdos or your lead Raikou or your lead Gengar, those are common tactics. But, if you have a creative way of doing it, Jinx gets used a lot now. I don't know it's the most consistent thing in the world, but it's a lot of gambling to be taken, a lot of risk taking, but it's certainly a tool you can use if you know what you're doing with it. If your plan is just click Lovely Kiss and spam Ice Beam, then you're not going to be consistent with it. And I assume you want to be consistent with it. A lot of my hot takes or whatever can be understood by someone going, oh, that guy's crazy, he just thinks. Once you understand that they come from a place of wanting to be in control of the battle, and I don't mean, every turn goes your way, but having the tools in your team builder so that you can play the game in the battle, I think a lot of them make a lot of sense. And wanting to be consistent, because a lot of inconsistency arises when you start cheating, let's say, on your coverage against common threats. It's like, oh, I don't need to check that. There's no way my opponent brings that. As soon as someone says, oh, well, I don't need to counter Zapdos with this team because my opponent doesn't bring it, I laugh in their face. Well, okay, I don't do that. But in my head, I'm just like, they're going to bring Zapdos. I hope you know that. You know how many times I've seen they never bring Zapdos or whatever. They never bring Zapdos, and then you go into the game, they lead off with it. It's stupid. You're not getting enough benefit out of it to do dumb stuff like this. Anyway, so you can do it with the special attacker to lead off. You can lay down spikes if you like, but that's generally how it's done. I myself like Zapdos because it shuts down Skarmory spikes, and it generally threatens every lead besides T-Tar. You can even stand against T-Tar lead if you want. I generally don't recommend this, but if you run like a bulky Zapdos that survives T-Tar Rock Slide plus Sand, then it's feasible, so you're not on the back foot on turn one. And you mess up, attempts to Focus Punch or Fire Blast or whatever, prick your switch. So, yeah. So then you have the Dugtrio. Now, not every team needs Dugtrio. You will want it more often than not. It is your Magneton on physical offense here. It's just way, way easier to get rid of Blissey this way. Because otherwise, you have to start running Calm Mind sweepers that are like instead of an offensive Suicune, you have to run a Rest Talk Suicune, which of course lacks ice coverage. So suddenly you're set up bait for DD Salamence. Your Jirachi's not hitting as hard. So yeah, not to say that you can't have stuff that can help against Blissey. Beat Up Charizard is a very good Dugtrio substitute, quote unquote. But Dugtrio just forces the issue so well against not just Blissey, but T-Tar and Celebi and Jirachi, that it's generally better to have it in your corner. Not that you can't go without it, but it's easier to have it, of course. Another underrated special attacker, Subpasser, that really takes advantage of the special walls is Vaporeon. I'm a big fan of it. Subpass, it can do a lot of things. They go to your their Milotic. It's like, okay, well, I just passed a sub to my Calm Mind BP Celebi, for instance. And that's the beauty of special offense. The special wall Blissey is all you really need to worry about. That's your biggest obstacle. Now you're thinking, okay, you got to get to the Snorlax Regice thing because they're going to be irritating too, especially if you don't have T-Tar. First of all, special offense very often does have T-Tar for the sand to beat down Snorlax and Regice and to, help against Blissey. But yes, you are absolutely right that, you can say, people used to say, oh, you just beat down Snorlax through Calm Minding and then hitting it with boosted attacks. It's like, yeah, you're also losing your Calm Mind Sweeper to do that. It's generally not reliable. And yes, you want to rain down Thunderbolts against it with Zapdos. And again, I have to stress how important I find Zapdos' threat level to be maximized through the modest nature. You want to be you don't want that T-Tar shrugging off your T-Bolts. Let's put it this way. Because, you're not really... T-Tar's always a threat. You don't want it to be scarier than it needs to be. And in general, you don't want Swampert, taking your HP Grass for 60% or something stupid. Or, even if you're running HP Ice, you smack the Celebi harder, you smack the Jirachi harder. So, yeah, you want that Zapdos strong, but I understand some people like the speed, some people like the bulk. I mentioned the physical bulky one. I would just still make it modest, It's like 248 HP, 40 defense? No, 32. No, that's, yeah, it's +1 Salamence. I don't know, it's not plus Sand, though. So I think, no, it's more. I forget what it is plus Sand, because the 248 HP, 32 defense mark is for +1 Salamence without Sand. If I remember right, it's been a long time, but do the calcs yourself. Always do the calcs yourself. But yeah, you still have a speed benchmark, then you can run a modest nature and still hit hard. Yeah, point being, the Lax and Regice of it all. When you've got that Zapdos against them early game, your Calm Mind Sweeper, whatever it is, you need to be able to switch into them. So my personal preference, I have a couple Pokemon that I find comfortable switching into Snorlax. Regice, I think, is more manageable because, yes, it's kind of a pain, or it can be a pain, but it is generally easier to beat down. And the fact that you're running Calm Mind means that it's less threatening. Obviously, T-Bolt can be irritating, but it's hurting you less, is the point. Snorlax will take out your Calm Minder a lot more. Regice can annoy your Calm Minder briefly, but it's generally going to be a losing battle. So the 3 Pokemon I always felt comfortable... Well, T-Tar... Okay, I guess 4. So T-Tar helps with Snorlax and Regice. You gotta watch out for the Snorlax Focus Punching you, or Earthquaking you, obviously. But T-Tar's 1. But the other ones I really like. Will-O-Wisp Gengar, which is... people think Gengar is just a Spikes spin blocking machine and late game cleaner, but mostly Spikes, Will-O-Wisp, Sand. Yeah, great. It's also a great special attacker enabler. Fantastic Pokemon. Because it is up there with Zapdos in commanding respect in its responses. You can't just throw anything into Gengar. You'll get ruined. It has a very limited pool of Pokemon that switch into its Will-O-Wisp and its special attacks, but mostly the Will-O-Wisp. And those also pair beautifully with Dugtrio. So Zap, Gengar, Dugtrio, tried and true trio. And obviously you have a ton of special attacking power and speed between Zapdos and Gengar. Excuse me. And a lot of really good defensive utility as well between their resistances and, the speed and special attacking power, but also their great typing. So yeah, Gengar helps as a special attacker enabler, and with Will-O-Wisp you threaten Snorlax. Watch out for Shadow Ball, obviously. Watch out for Pursuit T-Tar, but hey, that's what your Dugtrio is for. You kind of see how you're baiting in the threats and then you're Dugtrioing them, and just having them makes it so much easier. Yeah, Will-O-Wisp. Obviously, Gengar doesn't do this as well into Regice, which is why you got to consider it. Leech Seed Celebi, another Pokemon that doesn't really do well into Regice, but great Lax answer. And if they blow it up, hey, that Leech Seed Celebi was not Calm Mind Sweeping. Even on special offense, you don't have to run a Calm Mind Celebi. Or the Super Celebi, which is what was a set that made Calm Mind spam popular, special offense, way back when. Calm Mind 3 attacks, yes, great set, of course. But it has a lot of variation because it's Celebi. You can run Leech Seed and Baton Pass. Zapdos and Celebi love BPing back and forth. Talk about helping Dugtrio get in early. Yeah, they BP into their T-Tar against your Celebi, and you're in business. There we go. Yeah, I can only snap with my left hand. I don't know why. I've never been able to snap with the right. I'm not doing a great job right now, but... yeah. So, Leech Seed Celebi, and finally Metagross. Metagross obviously has the benefit of checking Regice as well. And it provides that rock resist, so yeah, it does a lot. So yeah, you're checking Regice, you're checking Snorlax, you're helping check DD Tar. You got to be careful because it's EQ week, obviously, but that just comes with the territory. You're checking Arrow, you're checking DDers in general because that great bulk. Yeah, and just generally, Metagross is nice because it means you have another way. Leech Seed Celebi is nice for this too, by the way. Metagross is nice because you have another way of forcing out Blissey that isn't Dugtrio. So you can kind of toy with the opponent and make them think, oh, there's not a Dug coming. I can relax with, depending on the situation, of course. But it's just nice to have some more physical muscle that isn't just Dugtrio, which is also why T-Tar is very nice. Now, you might wonder, hey, doesn't Metagross invite Skarm in like the plague? Well, first of all, Dugtrio is going to do that anyway. The whole idea is once you zero in on that special wall, really just Blissey, you don't have to worry about the Skarm getting free switch-ins anymore because the Skarm is an invitation for your special attacker. Again, I stress Zapdos because switching your offensive Calm Minder into Skarmory is a losing battle. But with Zapdos, you actually threaten it. Gengar, Raikou too, whatever. And you're thinking, hey, isn't there like a Dugtrio weakness going through, or, isn't that like a recurring theme here? Yes, there is. We'll get to it. Don't worry. And with, not Doug. Yeah, with Metagross, once you've zeroed in on the Blissey, you don't really care about the Skarm coming in because then you go to Zapdos and then you just rain the special attacks down on them that they're not really equipped to deal with. So yeah, again, mod a Zapdos. Don't let that Skarm survive your T-Bolt if you can help it. Yeah, so that's why I like Metagross there. But people also say, oh, we'll just use Swampert so you can actually hit Skarmory. And unless you're running an all-out offensive Swampert, you are not threatening that Skarmory sufficiently. Not really. So, Claydol can also work in this. The extra explosion is really nice. And spin support, helps your Calm Minder stay in great shape. So they're even tougher to take down. But yeah, and the thing about offensive Swampert is if that's your Swampert of choice, totally fine, of course, but then you have to be way more careful around something like Arrow, which is, a famed enemy of Calm Mind spam or special offense stuff. Because remember I was saying, well, special attackers outspeed and, beat the hell out of the physical attackers generally? Yeah, well, that's why Arrow is the exception, because it's faster than all the Calm Minders and hits the mark. It's not like threatening Okos, really, especially if you bulk out your Celebi, but it can be a pain. So you have to be very aware of it. So yeah, your rock resist, as always, you could have some plans. Like for example, I used to have a team way back when, where I would remove the T-Tar, and then I would Sunny Day with my Charizard. And when there's no sand in place, then Porygon 2 and Suicune are actually very good Aerodactyl checks. In sand, forget it. But if you're weather clearing, so that's an example of something you can do. Yeah, now with like Rain Dance Kingdra, which I think is excellent. I think Rain Dance is a great move on Suicune in general. Relieve some of the pressure. It can go either way because sometimes you want the sand for the Lax and the Regice. Sometimes you want to clear the weather so that your Suicune is less pressured by Arrow. So again, a lot of it depends. But see, that's why I like special offense so much. There is so much variation to it. I think it demands less. It sounds funny because, you don't KO the Bliss and you're toast. But, you put all your efforts into that, it's very doable, as broken as Bliss is. So, yeah. The Dugtrio of it all, you do have to be careful about this, of course, especially if you're going with something like Raikou. But a trick is generally, if you let your Celebi get Dugtrio'd early in the game, then the opposing Dugtrio will lock into HP Bug, right? Therefore, your own Dugtrio can come in as it's locked into HP Bug and take it out. So that generally works. And a lot of teams, you get rid of that Dugtrio, they are run over by Jirachi. Or Raikou. Although Raikou, I think, is... I don't like Raikou as much, but that's me, personally. Some other people like it. So, yeah, I'm a Jirachi guy, generally. But yeah, you have to have enough defense to where your offense is sufficient. And that's why I rip on physical offense, mixed offense. I don't think their defense is good, and I don't think their offense is enough either. And with special offense, I find that their defenses are better, and more importantly, their defenses are better in service of their much better offense. Better offense. I realize I tripped over my pronunciation there. Yeah, so that is the basic gist. You know, you got your special attacker, your bait for the special walls, you got your plan to get in your Dugtrio. It can be a tricky dance, but it's very well worth it. And then you have, your defensive core against the rock resist, the physical attacking checking, for when that thing gets a DD off or when you're facing arrow. And then you go berserk with your offensive threats. Yeah. I mentioned Kingdra earlier. Other rain dancers are great, but I like Kingdra because it takes a hit from everything, and it's so fast and so strong. I'm a big fan. The other, yes, that's what I was thinking of. Calm Mind Baton Pass Celebi is really great because suddenly it's not about sacrificing Celebi to do a lot of damage on something. It's or Celebi has to be threatening with Calm Mind. With Calm Mind, you can take a hit. You can bulk the daylights out of Celebi. You can take HP flyings, even HP bugs from Arrow, and if you can take them from Arrow, you can definitely take them from a Dugtrio. Even after a spike, Celebi's crazy. And then when you BP, not just against them, but in general, when the Celebi takes a bunch of hits, and then you BP that Calm Mind to Jirachi, and the Jirachi comes in with the Calm Minds, and you don't have to expend turns on boosting for your Jirachi, then it's just incredible. And obviously, you pass to a Kingdra, it is good game, right? But yeah, even the same principle applies to Suicune. I mean, God, to Zapdos, it's terrifying. So yeah, that's another thing you can keep in mind. It's not just BPing for scouting, Leech Seed, force a switch, BP to see what's going on, get Dugtrio in, but you can also Calm Mind BP. You can Calm Mind Baton Pass Leech Seed if you want. Celebi's moveset is very, very, very flexible. Yeah, as are its EVs, of course. So yeah, that's pretty much it. With Suicune, you can do other things. Suicune's interesting in that you really just need Calm Mind, Surfer, Hydro, Eternal Decision, of course, and Ice Beam. If you're not going the Crocoon route, the Rest Hog one, which of course you don't want to be walled by Salamence, which is the whole Blissey dilemma. But that's the thing with Sub, you can actually kind of mess with Blissey without really giving something up. Because when Jirachi goes Sub Calm Mind, it's giving up really important coverage. But with Suicune, it's like HP Grass, HP Electric. Is that really so necessary? And it's underrated though. It does make it much more scary when you can just drop a Swampert after a Calm Mind, for example. You think, oh, Swampert, that's not a Suicune check. Yeah, and then it Earthquakes you, and then suddenly you're in range of something. Or it Toxics you and protects, or it roars. It's just generally good. And obviously being able to hit other Suicune is very helpful. So, but yeah, Sub also lets you set up all over things like Milotic, and it's just generally nice. So Suicune has some leeway there. But I also like Calm Mind Roar, because whenever someone says, oh, well, my Calm Mind Blissey will destroy your entire team, Dugtrio notwithstanding, then as soon as, I used to get so many free wins with this, because someone was like, oh yeah, well, my Calm Mind Blissey just completely counters that Suicune, and I would just roar it out at +6 and destroy their entire team. It happened over and over and over when Calm Mind Bliss was the meta. And yeah, I also like Toxic in this vein, because this allows you to play Suicune a little more aggressively. Like, you might not sweep with it, but you're going to be breaking a hole in the opponent's defenses, because basically you Calm Mind, Blissey comes in, you Toxic it, right? So now Blissey cannot stay in and beat you one-on-one. That means something else has to come in, and that means whatever that is against a standard team like Skarm, Pert, Gar, whatever, then that thing is not going to appreciate that Hydro Pump, because on those teams, Blissey is the water resist, which is totally fine, of course, totally valid, but it can be taken advantage of. Now, if Blissey's being paired with Milotic, that's when it gets tougher, and that's why Sub is generally more appreciated. And why it can be a tricky dance, because, Milotic for the non-Sub variants and Calm Mind Blissey for the other ones. And that, my friends, is when you use Sub Calm Mind Roar Suicune. I'm waiting for it to make a grand comeback, but that set is an absolute devil. Obviously, Calm Mind Roar lets you beat other Suicune as well. Obviously, you have the lack of ice coverage that annoys you against Salamence, but hey, you're not giving it free DDs. So if you can cover it elsewhere, yeah. That's the other thing I was forgetting. You can use Porygon 2 to, check DD Ments and Gara, and just generally be a pain, and to counter trap opposing Dugtrio, but doesn't always quite work. P2 is tough to fit on a team. But generally, it can be a decent Pokemon. It's just very difficult to fit, as I said. Oh yeah, so there's that, and then there's Celebi, which can go 3 attacks, can go all the things we mentioned, and then Jirachi. Personally, I am a truther of Psychic, Fire Punch, HP Grass, tried and true, but it's really tempting to have that Ice Punch in there. And then generally you go with Ice Punch T-Bolt, Bolt Beam Classic. HP Grass coverage is so nice though. Fire Grass coverage along with Psychic is just beautiful. But again, depends on your team, depends on your playstyle. I think that's basically it. Oh, Raikou, Sub, Calm Mind, HP Ice versus Grass, ugly choice. Although you can do HP Grass and Crunch, because HP Grass hits Swampert and then Crunch hits Celebi. And but you're still walled by Flygon though. I mean, it's tough. But Crunch hits Claydol hardest, so yeah. And I mean, you're still not OHKOing Ments, but hey, that's a thing for Raikou users. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm leaving out. Obviously, you can run Charizard on these kinds of teams nicely with Sunny Day, or just standard beat up Focus Punch kind of stuff to get through Blissey. Mess with T-Tar. Although again, Dugtrio helps a lot there. But you get the general structure. Special attacker, bait in the special walls, remove them. However you're doing that, whether it's through pressure with Charizard plus. If you're beating up with Charizard, I would really recommend pairing with Calm Mind past Celebi. But yeah, generally Dugtrio, boom, Gengar. Gengar is great because Dugtrio traps a bunch of its stuff, and then you get the boom off, 2-for-1, maybe even more if you really play it right, like a 2.5, maybe even 3. You're winning the game at that point, or you should. But yeah, it gives you a lot of great tools. And then you finish with your special sweeper. And again, I have to mention Kingdra because I think it's lights out. One of my favorite teams ever is a Rain Dance Kingdra team. I used it in SPL, and it should have won if not for some true nonsense. But yeah, that was also that season. I used special offense twice, and I made a video about it. You can look it up. It's like almost 5 years old at this point. It's my SPL review. I think that was SPL 11. It's from 2020. But yeah, both times, the first time was like a more standard thing with like BP Zapdos, BP Celebi, Swampert, Dougie, T-Tar for sand and physical presence, and then cleaning up with offensive Starmie, which is another, that's something I left out. Because, I mean, it's not Calm Minding, and, it's not this bulky, but it is automatic late game because it's so fast and has that great coverage. So just an OHKO machine. It works beautifully with Gengar too. Zapdos, Gengar, Starmie, Dugtrio, Rock Resist, maybe T-Tar in there. Oh, it's a thing of beauty. Metagross T-Tar, I think I used to use that quite a bit. I mean, a bunch of people have used stuff like that. Point being, also, when you're Rock Resisted Jirachi, be very careful around the DD Tar Arrow, DD Ments of it all too. A lot of it's not even about like having hard counters. It's just about playing games in a way that you can manage the thing. If the DD Ments, for example, if you set it up, like you don't want to be switching Suicune into Salamence if you can help it. It makes Suicune a worse sweeper. It makes it worse at checking Salamence later in the game. So you got to be really aggressive, limit it. Obviously, it will get its opportunities. But that's why bulky Gengar is so great, for example, because it can kind of stand in for Suicune early on. Metagross, even pivoting into a bulkier Zapdos can help. So things like this. A bulky Celebi with Leech Seed. You can take that hit. You can stay in on the Ments and Leech Seed it, and if it doesn't want to DD early on, you can actually do something to it. Because if you just start throwing Psychics at it, you're going to lose. But with Leech Seed, you can actually make something happen, just as an example. So yeah, I use that team. And the second team was Zapdos, Gengar, Dugtrio, Metagross, Celebi, and Kingdra. And I love it very much. That's basically everything from me. I hope the framing was okay in this video. I'm too tired to do it again. But I hope the information was useful for you, that you enjoyed. I'm sure I was overlooking a lot. If I were to build more special offense now, you know what? I would look into a consistent way to do Jinx. I know there's a team going around with it that was used in Spoken Classic recently in that video I did on M-Dragon versus Issa, the RBYOU Dragonair fiasco. I still think I don't. Well, I like how McMegan used Jinx because he wasn't just calm minding and hoping for the best. He used HP Fire on it. He used Taunt. There are people experimenting with like stupid stuff like Perish Song. Stupid in the sense like, wow, that gets out of hand. Not stupid as in it's not good. If anything, it's a little too much maybe. But yeah. More consistency basically, because I think Sub Calm Mind Jinx basically just prays for the best. But with the kind of stuff Megan was using, he was using a very consistent style of special offense just with Jinx lead or something like Zapdos might be. So that kind of thing I think is good. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. I think people mess with like Glalie, Spikes, Explosion, Ice Beam. I mean, that's a great set of attributes for a lead. So yeah, there's lots of possibilities. You can mess with Smeargle, of course. Regice is a great Pokemon on the special offense team. I should have mentioned Regice. I apologize for that. I've never really been a very big Regice fan. I think there's a reason it dropped out of OU. But people are liking it more now. I like the way my buddy Jirachi used it because he paired it with Spikes. And a lot of Regice's issues go away with Spikes because no levitating Pokemon wants to come into Regice. Levitating or flying, obviously. But without Spikes, it can be awkward because it's so slow. And it's got, yes, Stab, Ice Beam alongside Thunderbolt. That's nice, but it's still not hitting that hard. And, without HP Fire, it's just complete setup bait for Metagross, Jirachi, Fortress. T-Wave is nice, but still not getting through them. Even with HP Fire, you're not doing a lot. So it can be frustrating sometimes. You're not really threatening Skarmory either, which is hilarious, even though it's base 100 special attack with max investment in T-Ball, it's bouncing off. And the explosion is very... But the whole idea is that with Dugtrio, Regice follows in the Zapdos Gengar tradition of its counters being Dugtrio weak. Now, the stupid thing about Regice that I really hate is when you start getting walled by Swampert. And that will make you swear off Regice forever. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I hated when I was running Regice. Oh, I'm going to bait in the T-Tar, the Blissey, and Swampert pivots in. And it does it perfectly well. I mean, Swampert does nothing to your special sweepers. Why do they need it? It's just done to keep your Regice away from the Blissey or T-Tar. And it works. What are you going to do? Run HP Grass Regice? Actually, someone did do that. Arctic Breeze did that against me in SPL last year. I think it's pretty goofy, but... I would rather run Toxic at that point, which also lets you mess with Blissey, mess with T-Tar more reliably. You do the Suicune trick against it, where you force out the Blissey, something else doesn't want to take an Ice Beam. I mean, there's a lot of obstacles getting in this way. Regice reminds me of the physical attacking thing, where it's like, yeah, everything's technically going its way, but it's still not working, But it has its good points, and so it should be mentioned. Yeah. It's also a good special sponge. Celebi, gets the job done against opposing Zapdos. You don't want Zapdos to be your only special sponge. But that's the thing with special offense. You naturally are much better off against special attackers too, because they're more robust Pokemon overall against opposing assaults. And I mean, not being ruined by Will-O-Wisp helps a lot. So you don't have to throw on stupid Lumberries. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you do want Lumberry, but generally on Jirachi because it's not affected by sand. And yeah, on that note, because you shrug off a T-Wave with Jirachi or even a Will-O-Wisp and you're good to go. Celebi's Natural Cure helps it a lot too, though. You naturally have that status sponge, so you can pivot in, Leech Seed, BP, status is gone. If you're running a Rest Suicune, which is of course very viable, sometimes people even run offensive Suicune with Rest in the last slot just because it's like, oh, you wanted to sit on me with Milotic and Blissey, now I sit on both of you. Non-Calm Mind Blissey, of course. So yeah, a lot of possibilities. And yeah, but it's just generally flexible. You have the leftovers. It's great, and you're not terrified of all this stuff. I actually have to take a bathroom break now, but it's at the end of the video, so I'm going to end it out because that's everything I wanted to say. I'm sure I might have forgotten something. Oh, yes, another underrated thing I like is Taunt Toxic T-Tar on these kinds of teams because you force in the physical walls, but you deny Skarmory Spikes, you Toxic a Swampert or a Claydol or Flygon switching in, and you have that physical presence and the sand. So that's a T-Tar set I really like on special offense, but you can go mix, you can go Choice Band, which is a great set. Really, half of it is there for sand, and the other half is for putting on physical pressure. It's also a great Calm Mind recipient if you Calm Mind BP with your Celebi and you have mix. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and this was useful for you, and I will see you in the next one.